Zara kept her head high, even though she knew her life was in danger. In Kailari society, military failure was often punished by death. "I did not fail, honored leaders. I followed the ancient laws of our people." "What laws?" demanded Elder Thekvor, her scales darkening with anger. "There are no laws that permit showing mercy to our enemies." "The ritual of worthy combat," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "When a warrior proves themselves equal in battle, they earn the right to be considered for bonding. This human, this Lee Jimin, fought with such skill and honor that I was compelled to recognize his worthiness." The chamber erupted in outraged roars. Several leaders stood up, their claws extended in fury. The idea of bonding with a human was considered disgusting by most Kailari. They viewed humans as weak, soft creatures who relied on technology instead of natural strength. But Zara stood her ground. "Our ancestors wrote these laws when our civilization was young. They speak of warriors from distant stars who would prove themselves worthy through combat. I believe this human is what the prophecies foretold." War Leader Moran's eyes glowed with dangerous anger. "You speak of bonding with prey animals. This is madness." "Then let me prove his worth," Zara said, her own scales beginning to shift to darker colors that showed her determination. "Give me permission to test him properly. If he fails, I will end his life myself. If he succeeds, you must honor the ancient ways." The leaders looked at each other uncertainly. The old laws were sacred, even if they had never been applied to aliens before. After a long debate, they reached their decision. "You have one chance," Elder Thekvor declared. "Prove this human's worthiness or face execution for treason against your own kind." Zara bowed deeply, already planning their next encounter. She would have to be careful. The tests ahead would be dangerous for both of them, but she believed in her heart that this human was special. Something about the way he fought told her that he was destined for greatness. Both Jimin and Zara now faced the challenge of convincing their own people that love could exist between enemies. 3 weeks after the incident in the Vega sector, both human and Kailari fleets were patrolling their respective borders when something completely unexpected happened. Space itself seemed to tear open like fabric being ripped apart. From the massive dimensional rifts emerged ships, unlike anything either side had ever seen. The Veth vessels looked like living crystals that pulsed with an eerie purple light. They moved through space in perfect formations, leaving behind trails of dark energy that seemed to eat away at reality itself. These weren't just ships. They were like floating cities made of some unknown material that constantly shifted and changed shape. Captain Jimin was commanding a small patrol group when the first Veth scouts appeared. His communications officer, Lieutenant Kim Arin, turned to him with terror in her eyes. "Sir, they're not responding to any of our signals, and our sensors are picking up something horrible from the nearest star system. On the main display, images from the Kepler 442 system filled the screen. What had once been a thriving colony world with millions of inhabitants was now nothing but a barren rock. The oceans were gone. The atmosphere was gone. Even the planet's molten core seemed to have been drained of energy. "They ate everything," whispered Navigation Officer Park Day, his voice barely audible. "An entire world, just consumed." At the same time, Commander Zara Thekna was dealing with her own encounter with these terrifying invaders. Her warfleet had discovered the remains of a Kailari mining station that had been completely hollowed out. The massive asteroid that had housed thousands of workers was now just an empty shell floating in space. The Veth didn't seem interested in negotiation or conquest like normal enemies. They simply consumed everything in their path: planets, ships, even the energy from stars themselves. Both human and Kailari forces quickly realized they were facing something far worse than each other. When the two fleets accidentally met, while both were tracking the same group of Veth scouts, the usual battle preparations stopped. Admiral Minho made the difficult decision to open communications with the Kailari forces. "This is Admiral Kim Minho of the Human Defense Fleet," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We have a bigger problem than our war. These crystal ships are destroying everything they touch." To everyone's surprise, Zara herself responded, "Human Admiral, this is Commander Zara Thekna. We have witnessed the same destruction. Perhaps We should focus our weapons on the true threat. The temporary alliance was awkward and full of mistrust, but both sides knew they had no choice. The Veth were like a cosmic plague that would eventually consume every living thing in the galaxy if they weren't stopped. During the first joint battle against a Veth squadron, something amazing happened. Jimin and Zara found themselves fighting on the same side for the first time. Their ships moved together like dancers performing a deadly ballet. When Jimin's tactical brilliance identified weak points in the enemy formations, Zara's lightning-fast strikes hit those exact spots with devastating precision. The human crews watched in amazement as their captain and the Kailari commander coordinated their attacks perfectly. It was like they could read each other's minds. Jimin would start a maneuver, and Zara would complete it without any communication between their ships. After the battle, both fleets took shelter in an abandoned space station to repair their damage. The station had been partially destroyed by the Veth, leaving only a few sections with breathable atmosphere. By necessity, human and Kailari repair teams had to work in the same areas. Jimin was checking damage reports in one of the station's control rooms when Zara entered. For a moment they just looked at each other, remembering their previous encounter when they had been enemies instead of allies. "You fight well, Lee Jimin," Zara said, using his full name with careful pronunciation. "Your tactics saved many lives today, both human and Kailari." "We make a good team," Jimin replied, still not quite believing he was having a friendly conversation with a Kailari commander. "Your warriors are incredibly skilled." Zara moved closer, her emerald scales reflecting the soft lighting of the control room. "There is something you must understand about my people. We do not choose mates through words or gifts like other species. Only those who can match us in combat earn the right to our hearts." Jimin felt his pulse quicken. "So when we fought before—" "I was testing you," Zara confirmed. "Every encounter we have had has been a test. The way you defended your ship, how you protected your crew, the honor you showed even when facing defeat. All of these were trials." "And?" Jimin asked, though he thought he already knew the answer from the way she was looking at him. Zara's scales shifted to a warmer green, color that Jimin was beginning to recognize as a sign of her emotions. "You are passing with flying colors, as you humans say. In every battle you prove yourself worthy. Today, fighting beside you against the Veth, I saw what I have been hoping to see, which is a warrior who could be my equal, a partner who could stand with me against any enemy." She paused, studying his face carefully. "Among my people, such a partnership is sacred. It is not just about love, but about two souls becoming one in combat." The lights in the station flickered as power fluctuated, reminding them both that they were in a dangerous situation. But in that moment, surrounded by the aftermath of battle and the uncertainty of their future, something important was being decided between them. "The Veth will return," Zara continued, "and when they do, we will need to fight together again. Each battle will be another test, another chance for you to prove what I already believe, that you are worthy of standing beside me." Jimin realized that his entire understanding of their relationship had been wrong. This wasn't just about romance or attraction. For the Kailari, love was earned through combat, trust was built through shared danger, and bonds were forged in the heat of battle. The war against the Veth was just beginning, but it was also the foundation of something unprecedented between two species who had been enemies just days before. The victory celebration was short-lived. Within hours of destroying the Veth squadron, both Jimin and Zara received urgent messages from their respective commands that would change their lives forever. Jimin stared at the holographic message from Fleet Admiral Kim Minho, his heart sinking with every word. "Captain Lee Jimin, you are hereby ordered to return to Earth immediately to face court-martial for unauthorized cooperation with enemy forces. Any delay in compliance will be considered an act of treason." The bridge of the horizon's edge fell silent. Lieutenant Kim Erin looked at her captain with worry in her eyes. "Sir, what are your orders?" Before Jimin could answer, another message came through on a secured channel. It was from Zara, and she looked terrible. Her usually bright emerald scales had turned a dull grey color that Jimin was learning meant deep distress among her people. "Jimin," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. I have been declared Thekmara, contaminated by inferior species. The High Command has exiled me from all Kailari space. I am no longer welcome among my own people." The pain in her voice hit Jimin harder than any physical blow. He realized that by working together to save lives, they had both become outcasts from their own kinds. The very thing that made them effective partners had also made them traitors in the eyes of their governments. Over the next few days, as both commanders traveled back to their respective homeworlds under guard, they continued to exchange private messages. What they shared was more disturbing than their personal situations. "The Veth signals we captured during the battle," Zara transmitted during one of their secret communications. "My science teams have decoded parts of them. Jimin, what we fought was just a tiny scouting force." Jimin felt cold dread wash over him. How tiny? Less than 1% of their total fleet. The main swarm contains millions of ships, maybe tens of millions. They're not just raiders, they're a complete civilization, dedicated to consuming everything in their path. The tactical reports from both human and Kailari scientists painted a horrifying picture. The Veth had already destroyed hundreds of star systems in distant galaxies. They moved like a cosmic plague, strip mining entire worlds for resources before moving on to the next target. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach both human and Kailari core worlds within 2 years. But when Jimin and Zara tried to present this information to their superiors, they were ignored. The human military leadership was convinced this was some elaborate Kailari trick. The Kailari High Command believed the humans were trying to manipulate them into a disadvantageous alliance. "They think we're lying," Jimin told his loyal crew during a private meeting in his quarters. "Admiral Minho actually suggested that I might be under alien mind control." Lieutenant Park Soo shook her head in frustration. "Sir, with respect, the brass are being idiots. I was there during the Veth attack. I saw what those things could do. We need that alliance, even if our own people can't see it." Similar conversations were happening aboard Zara's flagship, the Blood Honor. Her most trusted warriors gathered in her private chambers, their scales showing various shades of anger and disappointment. "The Council of Elders refuses to hear reason," reported Sub-Commander Veltar, one of Zara's oldest friends. "They claim your judgment has been clouded by human weakness. They're even talking about having you executed as an example to others." Zara's scales darkened to almost black. "Then we must act without their blessing. The threat is real whether they believe it or not. The plan they developed was dangerous and would make them permanent fugitives, but both commanders knew they had no choice. Using their most loyal crew members, they arranged simultaneous escapes during their journeys home. Jimin's escape happened during a routine supply stop at Lunar Station. While his guards were distracted by what appeared to be a mechanical malfunction, Lieutenant Arin and Chief Engineer Beiwu helped him slip away through the maintenance tunnels. Within hours, they had commandeered a fast courier ship and disappeared into the asteroid belt. Zara's escape was more dramatic. During a fuel stop, near the Kailari border, her loyal warriors staged what looked like an attack by human pirates. In the confusion, Zara and her core team disappeared aboard a captured human vessel that had been secretly modified for long-range travel. They met 3 days later at an abandoned mining station in neutral space, a region that belonged to neither human nor Kailari territory. The station had been left empty for decades after its mineral deposits were exhausted, making it the perfect place for a secret rendezvous. When Jimin's ship docked with the station, he felt his heart racing with anticipation and fear. He was about to become a fugitive from his own species, but he was also about to see Zara again. The past few weeks had made him realize just how much she meant to him. They met in the station's old command center, a cramped space filled with outdated equipment and floating debris. For a moment they just looked at each other, two outcasts who had given up everything for what they believed was right. "We can't go home again," Jimin said quietly. "No," Zara agreed, moving closer to him. "But perhaps we can build something new. A bridge between our peoples, even if they don't want one yet." Lieutenant Kim Arin, who had followed her captain into exile, pulled up holographic displays showing the latest intelligence on Veth movements. "The swarm is definitely heading this way. We have maybe 18 months before they reach the outer colonies." Sub-Commander Veltar nodded grimly. Our combined forces are small, but we know their weaknesses. We've fought them and won. Zara reached out and took Jimin's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that would have scandalized both their governments. Together, we are stronger than apart. This is what our people must learn, even if we have to teach them by example. Looking around at the mix of human and Kelari faces in the room, Jimin realized they were no longer just two commanders from enemy species. They had become the foundation of something entirely new, a group of warriors united not by race or nationality, but by their shared commitment to protecting all life from the coming darkness. Their personal bond was indeed becoming a bridge between worlds, even if those worlds weren't ready to cross it yet. 6 months had passed since Jimin and Zara began their life as fugitives. They had established a secret base inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the neutral zone, far from the prying eyes of both human and Kelari authorities. The base had become home to nearly 200 refugees, humans and Kelari, who believed in their cause and had abandoned their old lives to join the fight against the Veth. The asteroid base was a marvel of cooperation. Human engineers worked alongside Kelari builders to create living spaces that accommodated both species. The hallways were wider to fit the larger Kelari frames, while the lighting was adjusted to wavelengths that both human and Kelari eyes could see clearly. It was a small preview of what their united civilizations might look like someday. On this particular morning, Jimin was reviewing tactical reports in the main command center when Zara approached him with an unusual expression on her face. Her scales were shifting through colors he had learned to recognize, nervous anticipation mixed with determination. "Jimin," she said, her voice more formal than usual, "there is something important we must discuss, something that cannot wait any longer." Lieutenant Kim Arin and the other human officers tactfully found reasons to leave the command center, sensing that this was a private moment. Even Sub-Commander Veltar and the Kelari warriors quietly made their exits, though Jimin noticed they were trying hard not to smile. "What's going on?" Jimin asked, though he had a growing suspicion about what was happening. Zara moved to the center of the room and began removing her armor pieces one by one. This wasn't unusual. Kelari often removed their heavy battle gear during off-duty hours, but the way she was doing it felt ceremonial, almost ritualistic. "For months we have fought side by side," she said, as she placed her weapons on a nearby table. "You have proven your courage, your tactical brilliance, and your honor in ways that exceed even my highest expectations. Among my people, such proof can only lead to one conclusion." Jimin's heart began racing as he realized what was about to happen. "Zara, are you doing what I think you're doing?" She turned to face him, now wearing only her basic clothing beneath the armor. Her scales had shifted to a brilliant emerald color that seemed to glow in the command center's soft lighting. "Lee Jimin, I formally challenge you to the ritual of final bonding, not to test your worthiness, that has already been proven, but to complete our courtship according to the sacred laws of my ancestors." The formality of her words couldn't hide the emotion in her voice. This wasn't just about following tradition. This was about two people who had fallen in love during the most dangerous time of their lives, finally admitting what everyone around them already knew. "I accept your challenge," Jimin replied, his own voice thick with emotion as he began removing his uniform jacket. They cleared a space in the center of the command room, pushing aside tables and equipment to create an impromptu arena. Word spread quickly through the base, and soon both humans and Kelari were gathering to witness something that had never happened before in galactic history. The ritual combat began slowly, almost like a dance. This wasn't about violence or dominance, like their first encounter had been. This was about two warriors showing their respect for each other through the language they both understood best: combat. Zara moved with the fluid grace that made Kelari such feared opponents, but Jimin had learned much about her fighting style during their months together. He anticipated her moves, countered her strikes, and pressed his own attacks with the tactical creativity that had first caught her attention. They fought for nearly an hour, neither seeking to seriously harm the other, but both pushing themselves to their absolute limits. Sweat glistened on Jimin's skin, while Zara's scales shifted through various shades of exertion and concentration. The watching crowd held their breath, as the two commanders grappled, spun, and struck at each other with a precision that was beautiful to watch. It was clear to everyone present that these two warriors were perfectly matched, each complementing the other's strengths and covering their weaknesses. Finally, Jimin saw his opportunity. Using a move that Dr. Park Hana had taught him from her studies of Kailari anatomy, he managed to get behind Zara and pin her arms while wrapping his legs around her waist. It was a position that even her superior strength couldn't break without risking injury to both of them. "Yield," he said softly, his lips close to her ear. "I yield," Zara replied, but her voice was filled with joy rather than defeat. As they separated, Zara's scales began shimmering with colors that Jimin had never seen before, deep purples and golds that seemed to dance across her skin like living rainbows. The Kailari warriors in the crowd began a low, rhythmic chanting that filled the command center with an ancient melody. "You have proven yourself worthy," Zara declared, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "By the laws of my ancestors and the strength of my heart, I offer you my bond. Lee Jimin, will you accept me as your mate for all the battles to come?" The question hung in the air like a challenge and a promise. Around them, humans and Kailari watched in amazement as they witnessed the first interspecies proposal in known history. Jimin looked into Zara's eyes and saw his own future reflected there, a future filled with danger and uncertainty, but also with love and partnership unlike anything either of their species had ever experienced. "I accept," he said simply. The cheer that went up from the mixed crowd was deafening. Humans and Kailari embraced each other, celebrating this moment that proved their two species could be more than just allies. They could become family. But their celebration was interrupted by urgent alarms throughout the base. "Lieutenant Park." So's voice crackled over the communication system, filled with terror. "Commander, we're receiving distress signals from the outer colonies, multiple star systems under attack. The Veth main fleet has arrived, and they're not stopping for anything. The final assault has begun." Jimin and Zara looked at each other, their moment of personal joy instantly overshadowed by the cosmic threat bearing down on all life in the galaxy. Their wedding would have to wait. First, they had to save both their species from complete annihilation. The distress signals coming through the communication array painted a picture of absolute horror. Star system after star system was going dark as the Veth swarm swept across, the galaxy like a plague of cosmic locusts. The invasion wasn't just large, it was beyond anything either human or Kailari military planners had ever imagined possible. "New Harmony Colony, no response," reported Lieutenant Kim Arin, her voice getting more strained with each update. "Kepler Station, transmissions cut off mid-sentence. The entire outer rim is going silent." Jimin stood in the command center of their asteroid base, watching the tactical display as red warning lights spread across the star map like drops of blood. Each light represented millions of lives that had just been snuffed out. The Veth weren't just conquering territory, they were erasing entire civilizations from existence. "Other Kailari border worlds are suffering the same fate," Subcommander Veltar added, his usually steady voice cracking with emotion. "Thekminor, our oldest colony, stopped transmitting an hour ago. 20 million souls, just gone." Zara moved, to stand beside Jimin, her scales dark with grief and determination. "They're not even trying to occupy the worlds. They're stripping them completely bare and moving on. This isn't conquest, it's consumption." The holographic display showed the true scope of the invasion. Millions of Veth ships moved in perfect coordination, like cells in a vast organism. They attacked everywhere at once, overwhelming planetary defenses through sheer numbers rather than superior technology. Each conquered world was left as nothing but a lifeless husk, all its resources devoured to fuel the swarm's endless hunger. What made the situation even more desperate was the response from both human and Kailari governments. Instead of uniting against the common threat, they were both retreating to defend their core worlds, leaving the colonies to fend for themselves. "Earth Command has recalled all fleets to the Sol system," Captain Choi Tae reported grimly. He had joined their cause 3 months ago, bringing his entire ship and crew with him. "They're abandoning the outer colonies completely. War leader Moran, a grizzled Kailari veteran who had initially opposed working with humans, spat in disgust. The Kailari High Command has done the same. They speak of strategic consolidation while millions die. Jimin felt anger burning in his chest. So they're just going to let the Veth consume half the galaxy before they make a stand? It appears. So, Zara replied, her voice heavy with disappointment in her own people. Fear makes cowards of even the bravest warriors. That's when Lieutenant Park Soo spoke up from her station. Sir, we're receiving direct communications from some of the colonies under attack. They're asking for help. Any help. They know their own governments have abandoned them. The room fell silent as everyone processed what this meant. Their small fleet of refugee ships, barely 200 vessels, was being asked to face an enemy that had just destroyed entire planetary defense networks. We can't possibly fight that many ships, Captain Choi Tae said, though his voice suggested he was already thinking about trying anyway. Maybe we don't need to fight all of them, Jimin said, an idea beginning to form in his mind. The Veth move like a collective organism. They respond to threats the same way every time. But what if we could confuse their collective mind? Zara's scales shifted to a brighter color as she caught on to his thinking. Human unpredictability combined with Kailari aggression. They've never faced mixed tactics before. Over the next few hours, Jimin and Zara worked with their combined staff to develop something completely new, a fighting style that merged human creativity with Kailari warrior traditions. Human ships would provide tactical innovation and technological surprises, while Kailari vessels would deliver devastating close combat strikes. The first test of their new approach came at the Meridian colony, where 50,000 colonists were trapped on the planet's surface as Veth ships swarmed overhead. The rescue mission seemed impossible. They were outnumbered 100 to 1, but when their fleet dropped out of hyperspace, something remarkable happened. Captain Choi Tae's human ships immediately began executing seemingly random attack patterns. That made no tactical sense to the Veth collective mind. While the enemy was trying to analyze these chaotic movements, war leader Moran's Kailari vessels struck with precise, devastating attacks at exactly the right moments. The combination was unlike anything the Veth had encountered. Every time, their collective intelligence adapted to the human tactics. The Kailari would shift to a completely different approach. When they tried to counter the Kailari aggression, the humans would spring some technological surprise that caught them off guard. "It's working," shouted Lieutenant Arin as Veth ships began falling back in confusion. "They can't predict what we're going to do next." At the center of this new form of warfare were Jimin and Zara themselves. Their ships moved together like dancers, each anticipating the other's moves without needing to communicate. When Jimin's vessel would start a complex maneuver, Zara's ship would complete it perfectly. When Zara launched an attack, Jimin was already in position to exploit the opening she created. The Veth had adapted to fight every known tactical system in the galaxy, but they had never faced two different military traditions working in perfect harmony. Their collective mind, which had been their greatest strength, became a weakness as it struggled to process the contradictory information coming from the battlefield. "We saved them," War Leader Moran said with amazement, as the last Veth ship retreated from Meridian Colony. "We actually saved them, but the victory was just the beginning." Word spread quickly through the remaining colonies that there was still hope that someone was fighting back against the Veth swarm. More ships began joining their fleet, human vessels whose crews refused to abandon the colonies, Kailari warriors who chose honor over safety. Captain Choi Tae found himself working closely with War Leader Moran, their initial mutual suspicion gradually turning into genuine respect. "Your people fight with incredible courage," Tae told the Kailari commander after their third joint victory. "And your people think in ways that constantly surprise me," Moran replied. Perhaps our commanders were right about the strength that comes from unity. As their fleet grew and their tactics evolved, Jimin and Zara's synchronized fighting style became legendary among both species. Pilots and warriors from across the galaxy wanted to learn their methods, to understand how two such different military traditions could work together so perfectly. But they all knew this was just the beginning. The main Veth swarm was still coming, and when it arrived, Their small fleet would face the ultimate test of whether love and cooperation could overcome the darkest force the galaxy had ever seen. The real war was yet to come, but for the first time since the invasion began, both humans and Kaelari had reason to hope. The situation became desperate faster than anyone had predicted. Within 2 weeks of their victory at Meridian Colony, the HFY main swarm had swept through the outer territories like a cosmic wildfire. Half the galaxy's inhabited worlds had gone silent, their populations consumed to fuel the endless hunger of the crystalline invaders. On Earth, President Yang Yuna stood in the emergency command center deep beneath the planet's surface, watching as the final defensive lines crumbled one by one. The massive holographic display showed Veth ships approaching the Sol system, so many that they blotted out entire star fields. "Madam President," General Li Kyung reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, "our outer defense stations have been overrun. We have maybe 72 hours before they reach Earth itself." Similar scenes were playing out on Thektar, the Kaelari homeworld. Emperor Tekmor, a massive golden-scaled ruler who had led his people for over a century, watched his own military advisors deliver equally grim reports. "Your Imperial Majesty," War Marshal Velkoth said, his proud head bowed in shame. "Our border fleets have been destroyed. The swarm approaches our sacred homeworld. We estimate 2 days before they arrive." Both leaders had spent months refusing to work with their former enemies, convinced that their own military might would be enough to handle any threat. Now, facing complete annihilation, they were finally ready to listen to the warnings their exiled commanders had been sending. The communication came simultaneously to both worlds, a joint message from Jimin and Zara's combined fleet. "This is Admiral Lee Jimin and War Commander Zara Thekna," the transmission began, showing both commanders standing side by side on the bridge of their flagship. "We know our governments have declared us traitors, but we're the only force that has successfully fought the Veth and won. We're offering you one last chance to save both our peoples." President Yang Yuna felt her pride warring with desperation. Accepting help from exiles and working with the Kaelari went against everything her administration had stood for. But watching the approaching Veth swarm made the choice clear. "What do you need?" she asked simply. "Complete authority over all human and Kaelari military forces," Jimin replied without hesitation. "No interference from either government, no questions about our methods, and formal recognition of our alliance." Emperor Thekmor's advisors hissed in outrage at such demands, but the old ruler silenced them with a gesture. "The price of survival is always higher than the price of pride," he said grimly. "You have our agreement." What followed was the most rushed military reorganization in galactic history. Human and Kaelari fleets that had been shooting at each other for years suddenly found themselves fighting side by side. The integration wasn't smooth. There were language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and decades of mutual hatred to overcome. Captain Choi Tai found himself coordinating with War Leader Morin to merge their very different command structures. "Your people charge into battle like they're hunting prey," Tai observed during one of their planning sessions. "And your people fight like they're solving mathematical equations," Morin replied. "Somehow, when we combine both approaches, we win battles that should be impossible." But the most important moment came when both governments realized they needed more than just a military alliance. They needed a symbol that would unite their peoples at the deepest level. "The wedding," President Yang Yuna suggested during an emergency council session. "If we're asking our people to trust each other completely, we need to show them that such trust is possible." Emperor Tekmor agreed, though many of his advisors were horrified by the idea. "A bonding ceremony between species has never been performed before. It goes against thousand-year-old traditions." "Then we make new traditions," the emperor declared. "Desperate times require desperate measures." The ceremony itself was unlike anything either species had ever witnessed. It took place via holographic link between Earth and Thektar, with billions of people from both worlds watching in amazement. Jimin stood in the command center of their flagship, wearing a formal human military dress uniform that had been modified, with Kaelari ceremonial elements. Beside him, Zara wore traditional Kaelari bonding robes that shimmered with embedded technology to accommodate human customs. The ceremony began with Kailari traditions. Using a ceremonial crystal blade, Zara carefully carved ritual scars into Jimin's shoulders, markings that would identify him as her chosen mate to any Kailari who saw them. The pain was intense, but Jimin didn't flinch, knowing that billions of Kailari were watching to see if he was truly worthy of their respect. "By blood and battle, by honor and strength, I claim you as my bondmate," Zara declared in the ancient Kailari language, then repeated it in English for the human audience. The human portion of the ceremony followed, with President Yang Yuna herself officiating via hologram. "Do you, Jimin Lee, take Zara Thekna to be your wife, to stand with her against all enemies, to share in her victories and defeats?" "I do," Jimin replied, his voice carrying clearly across both worlds. "And do you, Zara Thekna, take Jimin Lee to be your husband, to trust him with your life and your heart, to fight beside him until death parts you?" "I do," Zara answered, the English words feeling strange but important on her tongue. When they kissed to seal their union, the cheers that erupted from both worlds could be heard even in the vacuum of space. Humans and Kailari, who had been enemies just months before, were suddenly crying tears of joy for a couple that represented everything they could become together. Admiral Kim Minho, who had originally ordered Jimin's court-martial, spoke for many when he addressed the combined fleets. "Today we don't just gain new allies, we gain new family, and family protects family no matter the cost." The wedding became more than just a personal celebration. It became the moment when two species stopped seeing each other as aliens and started seeing each other as people. The symbol they created together would carry them through the darkest battle any of them had ever faced. But there was no time for a honeymoon. The Veth swarm was less than 48 hours away from both homeworlds, and the real test of their united strength was about to begin. The Nexus Point hung in space like a cancerous growth, a massive structure that defied everything both humans and Kailari understood about engineering. The Veth had built their primary hive at the gravitational center of 3 star systems, using the combined energy of multiple suns to power their world-eating machinery. Standing on the bridge of the combined fleet's flagship, Admiral Jimin Lee stared at the tactical display with a mixture of awe and horror. The hive structure was larger than most moons, its crystalline surface pulsing with veins of purple energy that seemed to eat light itself. Around it, millions of Veth ships moved in perfect patterns, like antibodies protecting a vital organ. "Scanning shows the hive is actively draining energy from all 3 star systems," reported Chief Science Officer Dr. Park Hana, her voice tight with worry. "At current consumption rates, those suns will burn out within 6 months, and then the hive will move on to consume more." War Commander Zara Thekna Lee, she had taken her husband's name according to human custom while keeping her Kailari titles, studied the enemy formations with the eye of a predator. The Veth Queen is inside that structure. Their entire collective consciousness flows through her. If we can reach her, we end this war, Jimin finished, understanding immediately what she was thinking. But reaching the Queen would mean fighting through the largest concentration of enemy ships in galactic history. The combined human Kailari fleet numbered nearly 10,000 vessels, an impressive force by any normal standard. The Veth had over 50 million ships defending the Nexus Point. Captain Choi Tae's voice crackled over the communication system from his position commanding the human wing of the fleet. "Admiral, our pilots are ready, but I have to ask, how exactly do we get through that many enemy ships without being obliterated?" War Leader Moran, now commanding all Kailari forces, added his own concerns. "My warriors fear nothing, but we have limits. Those numbers seem impossible to overcome." Jimin and Zara exchanged a look that communicated volumes. Over the past months, their partnership had evolved beyond anything either had imagined possible. They could anticipate each other's thoughts, complete each other's tactical plans, and coordinate their actions with a precision that amazed everyone who worked with them. "We don't fight all 50 million ships," Jimin announced to the fleet. "We make them fight each other." The plan they unveiled was audacious beyond belief. Instead of a direct assault, they would use the Veth's own collective mind against them. The enemy ships moved in perfect coordination, because they were all connected to the same central intelligence. But that connection could become a weakness if properly exploited. Human ships will create chaos patterns throughout their formation, Zara explained to the mixed crew. Random attacks that make no logical sense, designed to confuse their collective processing. Meanwhile, Kailari vessels will strike at specific points to trigger their defensive responses. The goal isn't to destroy their ships, Jimin continued. It's to create so much conflicting information that their collective mind becomes paralyzed trying to process it all. Lieutenant Kim Arin, now serving as their primary tactical coordinator, looked skeptical. Sir, that would require perfect timing between every ship in our fleet. One mistake and the whole plan falls apart. Then we don't make mistakes, Zara said simply, her scales shifting to the deep blue color that her crew had learned meant absolute determination. The battle began exactly as planned, as human ships darted through the Veth formations like schools of fish, never staying in one place long enough for the enemy to establish firing solutions. They would appear, launch a quick attack, then vanish before the Veth could respond effectively, The same time, Kailari vessels struck with surgical precision at key points in the enemy formation. War leader Moran's ship led devastating charges that would break through enemy lines, only to retreat before the Veth could mount a counterattack. The effect was exactly what Jimin and Zara had hoped for. The Veth collective mind, which had easily adapted to traditional military tactics, found itself overwhelmed by the constant stream of contradictory information. Ships began colliding with each other as the Central Intelligence issued conflicting orders. "It's working," Captain Tay reported excitedly. "Entire sectors of their formation are breaking down into chaos." But the real magic happened when Jimin and Zara led the final assault on the hive structure itself. Their flagship, a hybrid vessel that combined the best of human and Kailari technology, carved through the confused enemy fleet like a sword through silk. On the bridge, the married commanders moved in perfect synchronization. When Jimin spotted a weakness in the enemy formation, Zara would already be maneuvering to exploit it. When Zara identified a threat, Jimin's tactical systems were already calculating the best response. "Breach in their defensive perimeter," Jimin called out, his fingers flying over the tactical controls. "Engaging now," Zara replied, her hands on the weapon systems before he had even finished speaking. They fought as one person with two bodies, their love having evolved into something that transcended mere emotion. They had become a living weapon against an enemy that couldn't understand how two different beings could work together so perfectly. The Veth Queen herself seemed to recognize this as their ship approached the hive's core. The massive structure began reshaping itself, trying to create defenses against this unprecedented form of attack. But every adaptation the Queen made was countered by the couple's ability to change their tactics instantly. "There!" Zara pointed at a crystalline spire that pulsed brighter than the rest. "That's where she is." "I see her," Jimin confirmed, feeling a strange connection to the alien intelligence that had threatened everything he loved. "She's afraid." For the first time, the Veth Queen is actually afraid. As their ship pierced the final layer of the hive's defenses, both commanders knew they were about to face the source of the galaxy's greatest threat. But they also knew they would face it together, united by a bond that had already proven stronger than any enemy. The love between a human and a Kailari had indeed become the weapon that would save both their species. The final moments inside the Veth hive were unlike anything either Jimin or Zara had ever experienced. As their ship broke through the crystalline barriers surrounding the Queen's chamber, they found themselves face to face with an intelligence that was both alien and strangely familiar. The Veth Queen wasn't the monstrous creature they had expected. Instead, she appeared as a being of pure energy contained within a crystal matrix, her consciousness flickering like trapped lightning. When she spoke, her voice resonated directly in their minds. "You are different," the Queen said, her mental voice filled with confusion and something that might have been wonder. "Two minds that think as one yet remain separate. This is impossible." Jimin felt Zara's hand find his as they stood together on their ship's bridge, facing the entity that had consumed entire worlds. Not impossible, he replied. Just something you've never encountered before. The Queen's energy pattern shifted, becoming more agitated. The collective is everything. Individual thought is chaos. Cooperation between different forms is, why does it not destroy you? Because we choose to be together, Zara answered, her scales shimmering with the same patterns they had shown during their wedding ceremony. Love makes us stronger, not weaker. For the first time in millions of years, the Veth Queen experienced something she had never felt before: doubt. Her entire existence was based on consuming and controlling, on forcing all life into her collective consciousness. But here were two beings who had become more powerful by choosing to unite while remaining themselves. "Show me," the Queen whispered, her voice growing weaker as the concept of voluntary cooperation began to tear apart her fundamental understanding of existence. Without speaking, Jimin and Zara shared their memories with the dying entity. She saw their first meeting in battle, their growing respect for each other, their decision to work together against her forces. She experienced their wedding ceremony, the joy of two species celebrating their union, the way love had transformed fear into hope. The Queen's energy began to fade as these alien concepts proved too much for her collective mind to process. "I understand now. I have been wrong, so terribly wrong." With her final breath, the Veth Queen released every consciousness she had absorbed over the millennia. Across the galaxy, the crystalline ships simply stopped moving as their controlling intelligence vanished. The threat that had consumed hundreds of worlds was over, not through destruction, but through the power of an idea the Queen couldn't comprehend or resist. 5 years later, the galaxy was a very different place. The world once known as Kepler 442b had been renamed New Harmony, and it had become the shining symbol of what humans and Kalari could accomplish together. The planet's cities were marvels of integrated architecture, with buildings that accommodated both species' needs while creating something beautiful and new. Admiral Jimin Lee stood on the balcony of their home, watching his 3-year-old daughter play in the garden below. Little Hana, named after Dr. Park Hana, who had become the child's godmother, was a wonder to behold. She had her mother's emerald-scaled skin, but her father's brown eyes, and she switched effortlessly between speaking Korean, English, and Kalari, depending on which parent she was talking to. "She's going to be taller than both of us," Zara observed, joining her husband on the balcony. Her scales had taken on softer hues since becoming a mother, and she wore them with pride despite some traditionalist Kailari calling her contaminated and probably smarter, Jimin agreed, smiling as he watched Hana playing with children from both species. Human kids and young Kailari ran together through the garden, their laughter filling the air with joy that would have been impossible just a few years earlier. Their home had become an unofficial embassy where humans and Kailari came to work out the details of their new alliance. The living room often hosted negotiations between species leaders, while the kitchen saw Kalari warriors and human engineers sharing meals and swapping stories. Captain Choi Tai, now promoted to Admiral and serving as the human representative to the Galactic Council, visited regularly with his family. His wife had given birth to twins who were already best friends with little Hana. War leader Morin had also settled on New Harmony, establishing a training academy where both species could learn from each other's military traditions. The Council approved the new colony ship designs, Tay reported during one of his visits. 50 more integrated worlds will be established over the next decade. Everyone wants to be part of what we've built here. The transformation hadn't been easy. There were still humans who distrusted the Kalari, and Kalari who considered the alliance a betrayal of their warrior heritage. But every day, more people from both species saw the benefits of cooperation over conflict. Dr. Park Hana, now serving as the Alliance's chief xenobiologist, had documented dozens of hybrid families like Jimin and Zara's. "The children are remarkable," she told them during a family dinner. "They're developing abilities neither species has on their own: enhanced problem-solving, improved physical coordination, even new forms of communication. They're the future," Zara said, watching as young Hana effortlessly climbed a tree that would challenge most adult humans while chatting in 3 languages with her friends. Not human, not Kailari, but something new and wonderful.